I'm Mark Eichmann along with Shirley Min. The June 30th ritual known as the end of the legislative session got bogged down last weekend over a fight for a higher minimum wage. We'll look back on how things came out.
Russ McKinney's been an Arden regular for over 50 years. We have a profile of his work and his philosophy on life and art and everything in between.
And where else but here could you get a story on tea caddies? Not just any tea caddy collection, mind you. This one has a connection to Broadway.
Can't wait to see that one. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
You never know what will happen on June 30th when the Delaware General Assembly concludes a session. It's often a night full of surprises, as Chris Barish experienced firsthand. Chris?
Hey, Mark. June 30th has a reputation for being the night lawmakers sneak controversial projects into the budget without any debate, like when the state bought a golf course. This year was supposed to be different. Supposed to be. Hopes were high Saturday night for a rare early finish to the legislative session. The last night routinely runs into the wee hours of July 1st. It's a meandering marathon that has become a Delaware tradition. But the bill approving the $4.3 billion general fund had already been signed by Governor John Carney. All lawmakers really had to do was approve the $816 million bond bill for highway, school, and other capital projects, and a $52 million grant and aid package for nonprofits. At 6 p.m., Carney was optimistic.
Yeah, my bet was 2 a.m. I've heard others say they want to get out closer to 12:30 or 1. We'll see. I think the way that the legislators work together with the administration on the budget is really important. We passed family-friendly legislation which will enable us to attract employees, as so many state employees retire over the next several years. We passed important gun safety and gun violence prevention legislation here in our state.
I think we made good steps on helping protect the public. We got 2 mental health bills put in place, and underlying all these shootings, there's always a mental health issue, almost consistently.
Senate Minority Whip Greg Lavelle, an upstate Republican, called the legislative session that began in January a productive one.
The budget grew about 4%, actually about 5.2% with some one-time spending on one-time state payments to employees and pensioners and all of that. So that was good.
As the evening began, lawmakers were more interested in honoring their own. There were long goodbyes to some of the 11 House and Senate members not seeking re-election in November. One was Wilmington Democrat Margaret Rose Henry, the first black female senator and outgoing majority leader. Around midnight, Henry discussed her quarter-century career as a champion of the poor, addicted, and women.
I guess the thing I'm most proud of is I did the needle exchange bill, which gave addicts clean needles and a chance to have training, not training, but a chance to have treatment and get other services that they need. I also passed the medical marijuana bill, which again is used to help people not have to take opiates and other drugs to treat some of their illnesses.
But about 3 a.m., disaster struck.
The concern is not the bill. The concern is the transparency of how it got here in the first place.
Earlier, the Senate had surprisingly passed a bill to raise the minimum wage by $1 to $9.25 an hour over 2 years. House Speaker Pete Schwarzkopf said he wasn't sure whether his Democratic-led chamber would consider the measure, but they did, infuriating Republicans.
There's not just frustration on my point, there's frustration in this whole building.
The measure passed by 1 vote. Then Republican Mike Ramone pulled a power play, seeking to exempt minors from the increase, as well as all adults in their first 90 days on the job. The Democrats balked at that, so Republicans rejected the bond bill.
We had an opportunity to work this through, and it was chosen not to do it that way. So the bond bill is here, and the bond bill will not have support from the Republicans.
It was well past 4 a.m., so another recess was called. Some lawmakers took to napping in their offices or at their desks. By 8 a.m., though, the deal was done. Ramone's measure got approved. Republicans supported the bond and grant and aid bills. A weary Schwarzkopf acknowledged the process was messy and time-consuming, yet necessary and successful.
Yeah, we got a grant and aid bill, we got a bond bill, we got a minimum wage bill, we did all kinds of things today.
A little less
Took a-
artful
took
than
some-
you probably wanted.
Yes,
though.
very much less artful, but sometimes that's what happens.
Still, Democrat John Kowalko said the delays, rancor, and posturing was unnecessary and embarrassing in a legislature that likes to talk about the Delaware way of cooperation between parties.
I'm embarrassed by the way we do business down here almost all the time anymore. Very tired, right? Just exhausted. Frustration really makes me more tired than anything else, and it's been a frustrating time.
Kowalko expressed what many colleagues would only say privately. It's ridiculous, many told me, to wait past midnight to bring up matters both routine and controversial that could have been put to bed days earlier.
You know, Chris, when I covered a legislative hall and the end of the sessions, you know, they went till 4 or 5 in the morning, and many of us said then that it's really kind of surprising that the state does business this way every June 30th. You know, open government advocates would say that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So what does it say about the Delaware way that we're doing these kinds of things really in the middle of the night?
Well, they did wait until sunlight this year. It was blazing outside, and inside there was a lot of brains were fried when they finally adjourned. Now, Schwarzkopf, he does have a point, though. He said it was well worth the gambit of going for the minimum wage hike, and that's going to benefit tens of thousands of Delawareans if the only penalty was that some well-paid people lost a few hours sleep. But next year, you're going to cover this thing.
I'll be losing the sleep. All right, sounds like a deal. Thanks, Chris.
With the midterm elections drawing near, a national nonprofit is working to draw attention to why voters 50 and older shouldn't sit this election season out. Recently, I sat down with AARP of Delaware's Kim Appalucci to learn what the organization is doing. Tell us about AARP in Delaware.
Well, we actually work on the national mission here in Delaware to make life better for people over the age of 50 and their families. We have 38 million members nationwide, which of course gives us great advocacy power, but in Delaware we have 187,000 members, and that's basically 53% of all the people over 50 in Delaware. So it's quite a good number of people who really are benefiting and from AARP's advocacy work, our information that they get, and all the different ways we try to educate people on issues that affect them as they move into their next chapter of life.
And obviously people need to sign up to become a member.
Correct. You can become a member. It's $16 a year, and you get a whole array of benefits for that, but you also can sign up to receive our emails, our text messages, and I would refer people to our Delaware webpage where you can find different links to get really good information from us that's tailored to Delawareans over the age of 50.
Well, we keep hearing how Medicare, Social Security funding, that's all kind of running out faster than we had expected. And so on the national level, and Delaware included, you know, there's this campaign that's being promoted. Tell me about this campaign.
Well, it's called Be the Difference and Vote, and it really is just a way to call attention to those issues to our members and their families. This year, the 2018 elections are very important, and our goal is to really inform our members about what's happening with those issues and to encourage our members to really educate themselves on the different political candidates' positions on Medicare, Social Security, prescription drug pricing, Medicaid, and in particular here in Delaware, we've been really pushing on the caregiving issue. And basically, we know that everybody knows a family member who's taking care of a loved one, right? Or even in some cases, a friend or a neighbor. And it is quite it can be quite a burden on the person because they're not getting paid. They are providing, in some cases, complex medical care to a family member. They're taking time off of work. They're spending money out of their own retirement to help subsidize what Medicare is not paying for. So these people need a little bit more support in our view. And so caregiving is an issue that we've been working on. We encourage people in Delaware, when you vote this year, to think about what the different candidates say about Medicare. Take a look at their websites, maybe ask them questions. Come to us as your resource on how these candidates view caregiving and better supports for caregivers.
And what's voter turnout like among the 50-plus group?
Well, it's always very strong. In fact, in the 2016 election, 90% of people age 50 and over who were registered casted their vote.
Wow.
So they do vote. And we just want to make sure that they continue to vote and that they vote in an informed manner about issues that are important to them and focus more so on those issues rather than political partisanship, because here at AARP, we really pride ourselves on being nonpartisan. Over our 32-year history of lobbying and advocating on Capitol Hill, we focus on the issues that affect our members and our potential members and their families. So that's where we'd like to get people to think. Yeah.
Locally, I know that your organization supports Delaware House Bill 400. That's the same-day voter registration bill.
Correct.
And, why is that bill important, you think, to Delawareans in the 50-plus community?
Well, registering to vote and getting all the ID that you need to vote can be challenging in some cases. We think that the same-day voter registration bill makes things more convenient. You can show up at your polling place that day and register right there. We believe it will pass. It seems like it's going to pass. It has, good support already. But sometimes people over 50 cannot make the trip that they need to register separately or get the ID they need. A lot of people cannot drive or have limited driving. Right. If you live in an assisted living facility, it may be difficult to make multiple trips to register and then cast your ballot separately. So we think it's more convenient for people over 50, and it really gives them that opportunity to make their voice heard because, as you know, every vote counts, including yours and theirs. So we just want to make things easier for people, and anything that makes it easier to vote is something we usually support.
Okay, Kim Appalucci from AARP in Delaware, thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
And just a reminder, the primaries in Delaware are on Thursday, September 6th. The legislative session ended over the weekend, and House Bill 400 didn't even make it out of committee. To get involved or learn more about AARP's Be the Difference Vote campaign, log on to aarp.org/vote. Coming up on First, Russ McKinney's devoted much of his life to art, and he's done it in Arden. We'll meet him this week. And these tea caddies have a connection to Broadway. It's an experience you'll want to stick around for in about 10 minutes.
Russ McKinney has been a mainstay inside the Delaware community of Arden for almost 50 years. He began drawing at the age of 4. Using copper in his works has become his calling card. WHYY's Friday Arts profiled Russ and his work in a story produced by Karen Smiles.
When we moved here, our second child was born. His name was Owen, and he was severely handicapped, and he died at the age of 6. And for those 6 years, we were nailed to the ground. And it really had to be beautiful right there. A block away did us no good. We were dealing with wheelchairs and all that. And so it really had to be beautiful right outside our window. And I took it upon myself to make it beautiful. The backbone of our garden is actually a collection of 28 different colors of daylilies. It's a real treat to go out and see what's in bloom today, And I like to joke that I also like the idea of having something in my garden that is in bloom and smells better than me. I just found the environment here it's so stimulating because you have nature and it's an accessible nature. And yet you have this concentration of people. It's an actual village. When I arrived here in Arden, I found myself for the first time in my life surrounded by really progressive people that stood up for peace in World War I and World War II, that had a history of that, a history of supporting civil rights. I was born August 6, 1945, the day of the bombing of Hiroshima. I first learned about it when I was 4 years old, and it came to play a central role in my life. In the 60s, during Vietnam, having to think about the bomb every year I had a birthday, I decided to object to the war. registered as a conscientious objector. I ended up going through about 8 years of altercation with the draft. I actually started drawing when I was 4 years old, and my mother was an amateur artist, and she recognized immediately that I could pretty much draw anything from the get-go. I started working with copper when I was 9 years old. My mother bought me a little kit, and it had a pen and ink drawing of a Japanese woman in a kimono, and I did the copper of it. In effect, it's an extension of pen and ink technique. You can stipple, you can crosshatch. It's based on line drawing, and at the very end you get into painting. There's a lot of depth, and the lines are elegant, you know, and it's because they're drawn. What I do first, I'm not going to stand out in the garden and draw for a long time. Usually I take a photograph. Sometimes I blow the photograph up to the size I want it, and then I draw right on the blow up of the photograph, convert it to a pen and ink drawing. Then I tape that to the copper and trace the drawing with a metal stylus. It's a lot of detail. And then you pull that off and you work face down on a soft surface, pushing out from behind with soft wood tools. Flip it over face up on a hard surface and go around the outside of the forms. And that gives you your relief. Then you do the patinas and the polishing. Finally, you do the painting. It's a beautiful medium. People started working in copper as the first metal maybe 10, 12,000 years ago. And I think we've just scratched the surface. I think it's beautiful where most metal is hard and cold. Copper is soft and warm. It interacts with light. A lot of people in the 60s were going off to found communes. We found one fully formed. We didn't have to found one. A place for big ideas, a respect for progressive values, and an integration of arts and crafts into everyday life. We're very lucky in that this is a village, and it does have a history. And the history is constantly in danger of being forgotten.
The Art and Craft Shop Museum originally opened in October of 2004. The museum actually goes back much further than 2004, as you can imagine. Then in the 1990s, a group of people formed an archives committee and actually had small displays in one area of this building. Eventually, people in the Ardens decided that it would be very appropriate that we have a museum. And this building, which was always known as the craft shop, became available. We have always had a significant population of artisans, potters, weavers, silversmiths, people who made stained glass windows. The Arden Forge operated here for many years, and there's quite a bit of that material around. And we have a very nice selection of furniture that was made here in the craft shop. We're very fortunate that we, in that are many, many artists. Not only the visual and figurative, but musicians and theater people. That's what makes it very special. And Russ McKinney is one of those people.
What we really had accumulated is a history of the cultural events in Ardens, you know, and I'm glad that you know, that's not all going to disappear. One of the ways in which I really felt integrated with the community here is I really drew the community. Being able to garden here. My wife says I have a talent for everything except making money. And I'm afraid she's right. I fell in love with guitar playing in particular because it's a small motor skill. I'm a small guy. One of the things that music did back in the 60s is it got us listening to real music by real people about real issues, not just commercial garbage. If I had position on election day. Right now, I really feel like I'm at the top of my game. I'm very lucky. By the election.
Russ McKinney has a book coming out on his life. It's called Just What I Needed. The book chronicles the interesting twists and turns of his life's journey. McKinney says if you want to write him, his email is mckinneycopperworks@gmail.com.
Over 50 years ago, Marnie Bramble began collecting tea caddies. Tea caddies are little containers that were used to store tea in the 18th and 19th centuries. Marnie's collection grew through her son Mark's travels. He's a Broadway author and director, and perhaps you know his works, Barnum and 42nd Street. Well, Marnie's collection is now on display in Odessa, and that's where our first experience picks up the story.
My name is Mark Bramble. I have made my career in the theater business. I write and direct Broadway musicals. More than 50 years ago, my mother began collecting tea caddies. The first tea caddy she acquired, she didn't know what the little jar was. She soon learned that it was an 18th century Chinese export tea caddy, and thus began her quest to learn all about tea caddies and to begin assembling a collection. A tea caddy is a container used to store tea. In the 18th century, tea was more precious than gold. Literally, it was a very precious commodity. When I began traveling with my shows, my mother enlisted me to help in her search for tea caddies. I got hooked on my mother's hobby. I mean, it's absolutely addictive. It opened up a world of art that I knew nothing about. The floral decoration and insects and objects of nature are brilliantly rendered and really elevate these pieces to works of art. My very favorites are the wooden tea caddies in the form of fruit. These are a mystery in the world today because there is no known record of them having been manufactured or sold. They have a lock and a key to protect the tea from pilfering servants, among others. They are the most charming, and to hold them is absolutely a wonderful experience. I think it's a glimpse into a world that is so completely foreign to our own, and it gives us the opportunity to have a peek into everyday lives of people in the 18th and 19th centuries. I'm a history buff, so I love the historical aspect of it, also the artistic aspect of it, and to hold an object that was a practical household item 300 and some years ago is quite a thrilling experience.
And Mark really knows his tea and tea caddy history. In fact, he literally wrote the book on them. It's titled A Tea Caddy Collection, and you saw just a portion of that collection in our story. The Bramble collection has about 400 pieces in it, dating as far back as 1700. You can see the exhibit on display in the houses of the Historic Odessa Foundation now through August 26th. Go to historicodessa.org for more information.
Next week on First, it is the ice cream season, but are you getting tired of the plain old chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry? Well, why not be bold and try some Taylor ham pork roll ice cream? It's the latest in a growing line of entrepreneurial flavors.
You can see the sweet and salty maybe
Works,
working.
right?
Okay. Are you bringing samples?
I can if you want.
Yes, please.
Let's do it.
Okay, that story and more next time on First. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Chris Barish and Mark Eichman, I'm Shirley Min. Have a great week.